Nurse Prime, The Human Awakens, epic HFY Sci-Fi tale. The sterile silence of the intergalactic medical station was shattered by the frantic beeping of a heart monitor. Nurse Prime, a seasoned alien with years of experience, had never encountered a situation quite like this. The patient, a human, was waking up too soon after an intricate surgery to remove a tumor from his thyroid gland. As she rushed to the post-surgery ward, her mind raced. Humans were known for their resilience and unpredictable strength, but waking up during such a delicate recovery process was unheard of. The moment she entered the room, the chaotic scene before her confirmed her worst fears. The human, eyes wild with confusion, was fighting against the restraining hands of two nurses, his powerful limbs thrashing as he struggled to sit up. "Do not let him sit up," Nurse Prime thundered, her voice filled with authority. The nurses, overwhelmed by the human's strength, scrambled to follow her orders. They needed to calm him down fast. The human's heart rate was spiking dangerously, and if he continued to resist, he could cause irreparable damage to his body or worse, to the medical equipment that kept him alive. The human's voice, rough and barely audible, croaked out, "Can't see." Nurse Prime's eyes widened in realization. The human was disoriented, his vision likely impaired by the remnants of the anesthesia. She quickly peeled the tape from his eyes, her touch gentle and reassuring. "You're safe," she said, her tone softening as she saw the human's features relax. "You're in a medical station. You just had surgery. We're here to help you." The human's breathing slowed, his body slowly releasing the tension that had gripped him moments before. His eyes, now clear and focused, scanned the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Nurse Prime watched him closely, her own anxiety easing as she saw the human begin to calm down. The danger was far from over, though. Nurse Prime knew that the human's early awakening was a sign that something had gone wrong. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Turning to one of the younger nurses, she barked, "Get the human doctors and anesthesiologists here immediately. We need to understand why this happened." As the nurses hurried to follow her orders, Nurse Prime couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest. Humans were known for their extraordinary will to survive, but this was something else entirely. She had a sinking suspicion that this incident was just the beginning of something far more significant than a routine surgery. The unexpected awakening, human resilience tested. The bustling medical station had returned to a semblance of calm, but the tension in the air was palpable. Nurse Prime stood by the human's bedside, her mind a whirlwind of concerns. The human's unexpected awakening had thrown the entire medical team into disarray. As she awaited the arrival of the human doctors, she couldn't help but replay the events in her mind. What had caused the human to regain consciousness so prematurely? The door slid open with a soft hiss, and a group of human doctors and anesthesiologists hurried in. Their faces were etched with worry, a stark contrast to their usual composed demeanor. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead surgeon, approached the bed with purposeful strides. She was a seasoned professional, her experience in human and alien medicine unmatched, but even she looked unsettled. "Status report," Dr. Vasquez demanded, her voice clipped and efficient. Nurse Prime quickly recounted the events, detailing the human's sudden wakefulness and the subsequent struggle. She watched as Dr. Vasquez's expression grew more serious with each word. "This shouldn't have happened," Dr. Vasquez muttered, turning to her team. "The anesthesia dosage was calculated precisely. The paralytic should have kept him unconscious for several more hours." One of the anesthesiologists, Dr. Jensen, nodded in agreement. "It's almost as if his body fought off the effects of the drugs on its own, but that level of resistance is unprecedented." Nurse Prime listened intently, her concern deepening. The human, now lying still but alert, watched the exchange with quiet intensity. His eyes flicked between the doctors, his mind clearly processing every word. Dr. Vasquez turned to him, her voice softening as she addressed the patient. "Mr. Smith, do you remember anything from the surgery?" The human Mr. Smith, shook his head slowly. "Not much," he replied, his voice still raspy. "I remember darkness, then a sharp pain, like something was wrong. Then I woke up here." The room fell silent, the implications of his words hanging heavily in the air. If Mr. Smith had felt pain during the procedure, it could mean that the anesthesia had failed to work entirely at some point, leaving him partially conscious during the surgery. The thought was horrifying. Dr. Vasquez exchanged a glance with Dr. Jensen, who immediately began checking the monitoring equipment. The machines hummed and beeped softly, but nothing seemed amiss now. Whatever had caused the problem was either resolved or beyond their current understanding. "We need to run some tests," Dr. Vasquez said finally, breaking the silence. "There might be something unique about your physiology, Mr. Smith, that we need to understand better." Nurse Prime nodded in agreement, already anticipating the next steps. But as she looked at the human, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just a medical anomaly. Humans were known for their adaptability, their fierce will to survive, but this seemed different. It was as if Mr. Smith's body had defied the drugs out of sheer determination, refusing to stay unconscious when it sensed danger. The door slid open again, and this time, a small team of alien medical researchers entered, their equipment floating alongside them on anti-gravity pads. Nurse Prime recognized them as specialists in human-alien physiology, brought in for situations just like this one. They began setting up their scanners around the bed, their movements precise and methodical. "Mr. Smith," one of the researchers said, "we're going to perform a few non-invasive scans to understand what happened. You won't feel a thing, but it's important that you remain still." The human nodded, his gaze steady. He had regained some of his composure, the initial shock of his awakening giving way to curiosity. Nurse Prime could see the gears turning in his mind, the same curiosity that had driven so many humans before him to explore the unknown, to push the boundaries of what was possible. As the scans began, Nurse Prime watched the human closely. His resilience was remarkable, but she knew that this incident would leave a mark on him. Waking up in an alien medical station, surrounded by unfamiliar faces and strange technology, was not something that would be easily forgotten. The scanners whirred softly, their lights casting intricate patterns on the walls. The researchers exchanged quiet murmurs as they reviewed the data, their faces inscrutable. Nurse Prime could only wait, her anxiety growing with each passing second. Finally, one of the researchers looked up, his expression a mix of astonishment and concern. "This is unexpected," he said slowly, his eyes meeting Dr. Vasquez's. "The human's metabolic rate is far higher than normal. It's almost as if his body is in a heightened state of awareness, even now. This might explain why the anesthesia didn't work as intended." Dr. Vasquez frowned, considering the implications. But why? What could have triggered such a response? The researcher hesitated before replying. "It's possible that the human's survival instincts are more deeply ingrained than we previously thought. His body might have perceived the surgery as a threat and overrode the effects of the drugs in an attempt to protect itself." The room fell into another heavy silence as everyone absorbed the information. Nurse Prime's mind raced. If this theory was correct, it meant that humans were even more resilient than they had ever imagined. Their bodies could adapt to extreme conditions, defy medical expectations, and survive against all odds. But what did this mean for the future? Nurse Prime couldn't help but wonder if this incident was a sign of things to come. As humanity continued to venture into the stars, facing new challenges and dangers, would they continue to evolve in ways that defied understanding? For now, there were more immediate concerns. Dr. Vasquez looked at Nurse Prime and the other medical staff, her expression resolute. "We need to ensure that Mr. Smith's recovery proceeds smoothly from here on out. Monitor his vitals closely, and let's avoid any further complications." Nurse Prime nodded, her resolve hardening. She would do everything in her power to ensure the human's safety, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they had only just scratched the surface of what humans were truly capable of. As she turned back to Mr. Smith, She saw that he was watching her, a faint smile on his lips. "Looks like I gave you all quite a scare," he said, his tone light but with an edge of seriousness. "You could say that," Nurse Prime replied, her own smile creeping through. "But you're not out of the woods yet. Let's get you back on the path to recovery." Mr. Smith nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'll do my best. After all, it looks like there's still a lot more to learn about what it means to be human." As Nurse Prime walked out of the room, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Humans, it seemed, were full of surprises, and she had a feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger story. Uncharted territory, the depths of human potential. The station's infirmary hummed with a tense energy as Mr. Smith's recovery continued. Nurse Prime could sense that the atmosphere had shifted since the unexpected awakening. The medical staff, both human and alien, were more alert, more cautious. Everyone seemed to realize that they were dealing with something far beyond a routine medical procedure. Dr. Vasquez and her team had taken to monitoring Mr. Smith around the clock, their curiosity piqued by his remarkable resilience. Nurse Prime noticed how the human doctors frequently conferred in hushed tones, their brows furrowed as they tried to piece together the mystery of his condition. Meanwhile, Mr. Smith himself appeared to be recovering faster than anyone anticipated. Within a few hours, he was sitting up in bed, his movements deliberate and controlled. The initial grogginess had faded, replaced by a sharp focus. It was as if his body was not only healing but adapting, growing stronger with each passing moment. Nurse Prime watched him closely as she went about her duties. There was something different about this human, something that set him apart from the others she had encountered. His eyes, once heavy with the haze of anesthesia, now gleamed with a quiet intensity. It was as if he was constantly processing his surroundings, analyzing every detail. "Feeling better?" she asked as she adjusted the monitoring equipment beside his bed. "Much," Mr. Smith replied, his voice stronger than before. "I think I owe you an apology for the earlier excitement." Nurse Prime couldn't help but chuckle. "You certainly made an impression, but it's not every day we see a patient wake up so soon after surgery." Mr. Smith nodded thoughtfully. "I've always been a fast healer, but this is different. It feels like my body's running on overdrive." "That's one way to put it," Nurse Prime agreed, glancing at the monitor displaying his vitals. Everything looked normal, yet there was an underlying energy, a kind of vibrancy, that she had never seen before. As she finished her checks, the door to the infirmary slid open, and Dr. Vasquez entered, followed by a small group of medical researchers. They carried with them a variety of advanced scanning devices, clearly preparing for another round of tests. "Mr. Smith," Dr. Vasquez began, her tone professional but tinged with curiosity, "we'd like to run some more scans, if you don't mind. We're trying to understand what's happening with your body." Mr. Smith raised an eyebrow. "More scans? I thought you already figured out that my body's just being stubborn." Dr. Vasquez smiled faintly. "It's more than that. We think your body might be adapting to something, perhaps the environment, the surgery, or even the stress of being in an unfamiliar place. We need to know more." Mr. Smith seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding. "All right, but if you find out I'm turning into some kind of superhuman, I expect a cool nickname." The tension in the room eased slightly as the medical team set up their equipment. The researchers moved with the practiced precision of experts, positioning scanners around the bed and calibrating them for the unique task at hand. Nurse Prime stood by, watching as the scans began. The devices emitted a soft hum, their sensors sweeping over Mr. Smith's body with meticulous care. She could see the data being displayed on nearby screens, complex graphs and readings that were far beyond her expertise. As the scans progressed, the researchers exchanged quiet words, their expressions ranging from puzzle to intrigue. Nurse Prime couldn't help but feel a growing sense of anticipation. What were they finding? Was there something truly extraordinary about this human? After what felt like an eternity, the scans finally concluded. Dr. Vasquez and the lead researcher, a tall, thin alien with elongated limbs and a calm demeanor, approached Mr. Smith. "We've gathered some very interesting data," the researcher began, his voice smooth and measured. "It appears that your body is indeed adapting at an accelerated rate. Your cells are regenerating faster than normal, and there's a significant increase in neural activity." Dr. Vasquez nodded in agreement. "We're seeing patterns that suggest enhanced cognitive function as well. It's as if your brain is processing information more efficiently." Mr. Smith looked from one to the other, a hint of disbelief in his eyes. "Are you saying I'm getting smarter?" "Not necessarily smarter," the researcher clarified, "but your brain is definitely operating at a higher capacity. We don't yet understand the full implications, but it's clear that your body is undergoing some form of rapid evolution." Nurse Prime's breath caught in her throat. Rapid evolution. The words echoed in her mind, filling her with a mixture of awe and unease. Could it be possible that Mr. Smith was becoming something more than human? Mr. Smith, however, seemed to take the news in stride. "Well, that's a bit of a surprise," he said, his tone light, but with a serious undercurrent. "I guess that means I'll have to be careful with my thoughts." Dr. Vasquez smiled, though there was still a trace of concern in her eyes. "We're going to continue monitoring you closely, Mr. Smith. Your recovery is our top priority, but we also need to ensure that whatever is happening to you doesn't pose a risk." Mr. Smith nodded. "Understood. But honestly, I feel fine. Better than fine, actually. It's like I got all this energy I didn't have before." Nurse Prime couldn't help but marvel at his calm demeanor. Most patients would be overwhelmed by the idea of their body changing in such profound ways, but Mr. Smith seemed almost intrigued. It was a testament to the human spirit, a willingness to face the unknown with curiosity rather than fear. As the medical team began packing up their equipment, Nurse Prime stepped forward. "If you need anything, Mr. Smith, just let me know. We're here to help you through this." "Thanks," he replied, his gaze meeting hers with a warmth that belied the strange circumstances. "I appreciate it." With the scans complete and the medical team dispersing, Nurse Prime couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever was happening to Mr. Smith, she was determined to see him through it. The challenges ahead were uncharted territory, but she knew that humanity had faced the unknown before and emerged stronger for it. As she left the room, Nurse Prime couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary, something that could change not just Mr. Smith's life, but the future of humanity itself. Unseen forces, the evolution of humanity. In the days that followed, Mr. Smith's progress continued to baffle and intrigue the station's medical team. His physical recovery, already impressive, was now coupled with increasingly remarkable mental and cognitive abilities. The station's researchers were deep in analysis, attempting to unravel the mystery of this rapid evolution. Nurse Prime observed Mr. Smith closely during her shifts, noting how he seemed to absorb new information with ease, his mind working at a speed that defied explanation. He was more than just recovering. He was transforming into something beyond human. The realization sent ripples of both excitement and concern through the staff. One evening, as the station's artificial lights dimmed to simulate night, Nurse Prime found herself in Mr. Smith's room, running routine checks. The soft glow of the monitors cast a gentle light across the room, and the atmosphere was calm, almost serene. "How are you feeling tonight?" she asked, glancing at the readings on the screen. Mr. Smith looked up from a datapad he had been studying. "Surprisingly good, considering everything that's happened. I'm starting to notice things I didn't before, details, patterns, connections. It's like my mind is running on a higher frequency." Nurse Prime nodded thoughtfully. The scans did show increased neural activity. It's fascinating, but also a bit unsettling. We've never seen anything like this. Mr. Smith smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "You're worried I'm going to turn into some kind of superhuman, aren't you?" She chuckled, shaking her head. "I wouldn't go that far, but it's hard not to be concerned. We're in uncharted territory, and we don't know where this path leads. Mr. Smith's expression grew more serious. I've been thinking about that too. Whatever's happening to me, it feels like I'm on the edge of something big, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Before Nurse Prime could respond, the door slid open, and Dr. Vasquez entered, her face betraying a mix of determination and anxiety. Mr. Smith, Nurse Prime, she greeted them with a nod. I need to discuss something with both of you. Nurse Prime's heart skipped a beat. Dr. Vasquez's tone was different, more urgent than before. She could tell that whatever the doctor had to say was serious. What's going on? Mr. Smith asked, his gaze shifting to Dr. Vasquez. Dr. Vasquez hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. We've been reviewing the data from your scans, and we found something unexpected. Your body isn't just healing, it's adapting at a rate we've never seen. And it's not just physical. Your brain is evolving, developing new capabilities. Mr. Smith leaned forward, his interest piqued. What kind of capabilities? Dr. Vasquez glanced at Nurse Prime before continuing. Enhanced cognitive function, increased memory retention, heightened perception. But there's more. We believe that your brain might be developing new neural pathways, ones that could potentially allow for abilities beyond normal human capacity. Nurse Prime felt a chill run down her spine. Abilities beyond normal human capacity. The implications were staggering, and she struggled to wrap her mind around what that could mean. Mr. Smith, however, seemed unfazed. You're talking about something like telepathy or telekinesis. Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. It's a possibility. We're still in the early stages of understanding this, but the signs are there. Your brain is changing in ways that we can't fully predict. Nurse Prime felt the weight of the revelation settle over the room. If Mr. Smith was indeed developing abilities beyond human norms, it could change everything. Not just for him, but for the entire human race. Mr. Smith leaned back in his bed, his expression contemplative. So, what do we do now? I'm not exactly trained for dealing with superpowers. Dr. Vasquez smiled faintly. For now, we monitor you closely. We need to understand what's happening to you, and more importantly, how to manage it. This kind of evolution is unprecedented, and we need to proceed with caution. Nurse Prime felt a surge of protectiveness toward Mr. Smith. He was facing something extraordinary, something that no one could have anticipated. But she knew that he was strong, stronger than anyone had given him credit for. He would handle this challenge with the same resilience that had carried him through the surgery and its aftermath. As the conversation wound down, Dr. Vasquez prepared to leave, but not before giving Mr. Smith one final piece of advice. Listen to your body, Mr. Smith. Pay attention to what you're feeling, both physically and mentally. If anything seems out of the ordinary, let us know immediately. Mr. Smith nodded, his expression serious. I will, and thank you, Dr. Vasquez, for everything. With that, Dr. Vasquez left the room, leaving Nurse Prime and Mr. Smith alone once more. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts, each of them processing the enormity of what had just been revealed. Nurse Prime finally broke the silence. You're handling this better than most people would. Mr. Smith shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. I've always believed that the human mind is capable of more than we realize. Maybe this is just the next step in our evolution, or maybe it's something else entirely. Either way, I'm not going to let it scare me. His words resonated with Nurse Prime. In the face of the unknown, Mr. Smith's calm acceptance and quiet determination were nothing short of inspiring. He was right. They couldn't afford to let fear dictate their actions. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, with courage and resolve. As Nurse Prime prepared to leave the room, Mr. Smith called out to her, Hey, Nurse Prime. She turned back, curious. Yes. Thanks for sticking with me through all this. It means a lot. She smiled warmly. You're welcome, Mr. Smith. And remember, you're not alone in this. We'll get through it together. With that, she left the room, her mind racing with thoughts of what the future might hold. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain: Mr. Smith was no ordinary human, and his journey was far from over. As the station settled into the quiet of simulated night, Nurse Prime couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the brink of something extraordinary. The evolution of humanity was unfolding before their eyes, and it was both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. But one thing was clear: the story of Mr. Smith was only just beginning. The unexpected visitor, a new alliance. The station buzzed with a heightened sense of anticipation following the revelations about Mr. Smith's transformation. Word spread quickly among the staff, and curiosity mingled with concern as everyone awaited the next development. Despite the air of uncertainty, the station's daily routines continued, though with a palpable tension hanging over the crew. Nurse Prime, however, remained focused on her duties. Her connection with Mr. Smith had grown stronger, and she was determined to see him through whatever lay ahead. His evolution was unlike anything she had ever witnessed, and it was clear that his journey was far from over. One morning, just as Nurse Prime was about to begin her shift, an unexpected alert echoed through the station. The deep, resonant tones of the alarm indicated a ship approaching, a ship not registered in their system. She rushed to the nearest console to check the readings, her heart racing. The station's defense systems had automatically activated, preparing for a potential threat, but the incoming vessel wasn't displaying any hostile intent. Instead, it seemed to be hailing the station. The station's commander, Captain Arden, appeared on the main communications screen, his expression a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Attention, all personnel. We have an unidentified ship requesting permission to dock. Stand by for further instructions." Nurse Prime's mind raced with possibilities. Could it be a rescue mission from Earth? Or perhaps an alien delegation responding to the rumors of Mr. Smith's abilities? Whatever it was bound to change everything. Minutes later, Captain Arden's voice came through the intercom again. "The ship has identified itself as a diplomatic envoy from the Tsari Collective. They've requested an audience with Mr. Smith. All available medical personnel, report to the docking bay immediately." Nurse Prime's heart skipped a beat. The Tsari were a highly advanced species known for their neutrality and wisdom. They rarely involved themselves in the affairs of other races, preferring to observe from a distance. That they had come in person meant something of immense significance was at stake. She quickly made her way to the docking bay, joining a small group of medical and security personnel. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but Nurse Prime felt a strange sense of calm. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment when the full implications of Mr. Smith's transformation would begin to unfold. As the Tsari ship docked, a low hum filled the bay, followed by a soft hiss as the airlock cycled. The ship's door slid open, revealing 3 figures cloaked in flowing garments that shimmered with an iridescent light. Their features were delicate, with large, expressive eyes that radiated a deep intelligence. They moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly, and Nurse Prime could sense their presence before they even spoke. The lead figure, taller and more regal than the others, stepped forward and addressed the group. "I am Envoy Lyrian of the Tsari Collective. We have come to speak with Mr. Smith, the human who has undergone a significant evolution. It is imperative that we meet with him immediately." Captain Arden stepped forward, his voice steady but respectful. "Envoy Lyrian, welcome to our station. Mr. Smith is currently in our medical ward. We can escort you to him, but may I ask the nature of your visit?" Lyrian's gaze seemed to pierce through the captain, and when they spoke, their voice was soft but resonant. "Mr. Smith's transformation is of great interest to the Tsari. His evolution represents a potential shift in the balance of power in this sector. We wish to offer our assistance in understanding and managing this change." Nurse Prime exchanged a glance with Dr. Vasquez, who had just arrived at her side. The implications of Lyrian's words were staggering. The Tsari were not just interested, they were concerned enough to offer help. Whatever was happening to Mr. Smith, it was far more significant than anyone had realized. Captain Arden nodded, recognizing the gravity of the situation. Very well. Please follow us to the medical ward. The journey to the medical ward was tense but silent, each step heavy with the weight of the unknown. When they arrived, Mr. Smith was sitting up in his bed, his eyes narrowing slightly as if Sari entered the room. Envoy Lyrian approached Mr. Smith with a calm demeanor, their eyes studying him intently. Mr. Smith, it is an honor to meet you. We have been monitoring your progress from afar, and we believe you may hold the key to something much larger than any of us. Mr. Smith looked at Nurse Prime, then back at Lyrian. I appreciate the concern, but I'm still trying to figure out what's happening to me. How can you help? Lyrian's expression softened. Your evolution is not just a biological anomaly. It is the result of forces that are far older and more complex than your species knows. The Tsari have encountered such phenomena before, though rarely. We can guide you, help you understand and control these new abilities. Mr. Smith frowned, his skepticism evident. And what do you get out of this? Lyrian smiled faintly, their eyes gleaming. Our interest is in maintaining balance. If your evolution is not guided properly, it could lead to unintended consequences, not just for you, but for all sentient beings in this sector. We wish to ensure that does not happen. Nurse Prime could sense the weight of Lyrian's words. The stakes were higher than any of them had imagined. Mr. Smith's evolution wasn't just a personal journey, it was a potential catalyst for events that could reshape the galaxy. After a moment of contemplation, Mr. Smith nodded. All right, I'm willing to listen, but I want to know everything, no holding back. Lyrian inclined their head in agreement. Of course, we will be completely transparent with you. As the Tsari prepared to share their knowledge, Nurse Prime felt a surge of hope mixed with apprehension. The path ahead was uncertain, but with the Tsari's guidance, perhaps Mr. Smith could learn to harness his new abilities safely. The room filled with a sense of anticipation as Lyrian began to speak, revealing secrets that had been hidden for eons. It was clear that Mr. Smith's evolution was part of something much larger, a cosmic event that could change the course of history. And as the conversation unfolded, Nurse Prime realized that they were no longer just caretakers of a patient. They were witnesses to the dawn of a new era, one that would challenge everything they knew about humanity, the galaxy, and the very fabric of existence itself. Unraveling the ancient secrets, the Tsari envoy, Lyrian, began to unravel the story, their voice carrying the weight of millennia. The air in the room seemed to grow still, every eye fixed on the enigmatic alien as they spoke. Long ago, Lyrian began, before the rise of your species, there existed a powerful civilization known as the Irion. They were masters of genetics and energy manipulation, creating beings that could tap into the raw forces of the universe. The Irion believed themselves invincible, but their hubris led to their downfall. In their final days, they infused their knowledge and power into select individuals, scattering them across the stars. These individuals, known as the heirs of Urian, were meant to awaken only when the universe required their strength once more. Lyrian paused, letting the gravity of their words sink in. Mr. Smith listened intently, the realization slowly dawning on him. Are you saying that I'm one of these heirs? Lyrian nodded solemnly. Indeed, the changes you are undergoing are the manifestation of this ancient legacy. The Urium's knowledge has been lying dormant within your genetic code, activated by a convergence of cosmic energies. You are the first to awaken in this era, but you may not be the last. Nurse Prime felt a shiver run down her spine. The implications of Lyrian's revelation were staggering. Mr. Smith wasn't just a patient anymore. He was a living link to an ancient, almost mythical past, and his transformation could have consequences that rippled far beyond their understanding. Dr. Vasquez, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up, her voice tinged with a mix of skepticism and awe. If this is true, what does it mean for Mr. Smith? What will happen to him? Lyrian's gaze shifted to Dr. Vasquez, their expression unreadable. Mr. Smith's evolution is just beginning. As his powers grow, he will gain abilities that defy conventional science, control over matter and energy, heightened senses, perhaps even the ability to manipulate time and space. But with this power comes great responsibility. If not carefully managed, it could consume him or worse, destabilize the very fabric of reality. Mr. Smith clenched his fists, his mind racing. The idea of possessing such immense power was both exhilarating and terrifying. And what about the other hairs? If there are more like me, are they all going to wake up too? Lyrian's expression darkened slightly. That is a possibility. However, not all hairs will awaken with pure intentions. Some may seek to exploit their powers for personal gain, or worse, for conquest. That is why it is crucial that you learn to master your abilities quickly, to be ready for what may come. The room fell silent, the weight of the situation pressing down on everyone. Nurse Prime could see the internal struggle playing out on Mr. Smith's face. He was being thrust into a role he hadn't asked for, with responsibilities that no one could have foreseen. Captain Arden, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward, his voice firm and resolute. "Mr. Smith, whatever happens, know that you have the full support of this station. We'll do everything in our power to help you navigate this transformation. We're in this together." Mr. Smith looked around at the faces of those who had become his unexpected allies. There was determination in their eyes, a shared resolve that gave him a sense of solidarity. He nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Thank you. I'm going to need all the help I can get." Lyrian stepped forward, their presence commanding. "The first step is to understand the nature of your abilities. We will begin with training sessions designed to help you control and channel the energies within you. It will not be easy, and the risks are great, but it is necessary if we are to prevent catastrophe." Dr. Vasquez exchanged a glance with Nurse Prime, who nodded in silent agreement. "We'll assist in any way we can," Dr. Vasquez said. "But we'll need to monitor Mr. Smith closely, especially as his abilities start to manifest. His health and safety are still our top priority." Lyrian inclined their head in agreement. "Of course, the Tsari have advanced medical knowledge that we can share with you. Together, we can ensure Mr. Smith's well-being as he embarks on this journey." Nurse Prime felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. They were stepping into uncharted territory, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. This was more than just a medical case, it was a mission, one that could define the future of their entire galaxy. As the conversation continued, plans were made for the first training session. The Tsari would guide Mr. Smith through the process, while the station's medical team would monitor his condition and provide support. It was a delicate balance between exploration and caution, but it was the only way forward. Later that day, as Nurse Prime prepared to end her shift, she couldn't help but think about the journey that lay ahead. Mr. Smith was no longer just a human. He was the heir to an ancient legacy, a beacon of hope and danger in equal measure. The galaxy was on the brink of a new era, and they were all part of its unfolding story. As she looked out of the observation window, gazing at the stars that stretched endlessly into the void, Nurse Prime felt a deep sense of resolve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The story was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning.